Hi, and welcome to episode 5 of Humble and Hungry. Here on Humble and Hungry, I'm celebrating and recognizing the small intentional things we can do to lead happier and healthier lives. On today's episode, I really want to raise awareness of weight bias and all of the intentional, respectful ways we can think about and talk about weight. So the buzzwords around this are, of course, weight discrimination, weight bias, and weight stigma. And all of these terms really talk about stereotyping someone based on their weight. So today we'll talk about what that means, the effect it has on people, and what we can do to make a difference. Before we dig right into this topic, I really want to remind you why I'm so comfortable talking about this. And that's because I've been treated in all of the different categories throughout my life. I have had really extreme weight issues. I've gone through that transition of losing a lot of weight. And then I've come out on the other side and seen the difference in the way I'm treated. So while this is something I always recognize throughout my life, now is the time where I really feel the need to take a stand and make it better for people. So on my Instagram page, I asked my followers if they've ever recognized, experienced, or just thought about weight discrimination. And 90% of people said yes. And this overwhelming response did not surprise me at all. Weight discrimination is actually referred to as the discrimination no one talks about. And that was by an author in Forbes, who was their senior contributor for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And her article, her name is Janice Gassam Asare, and in her piece, she cites research that obese individuals experience prejudice and discrimination with evidence that obese individuals are perceived as lazy, emotionally unstable, lacking self-discipline, and being less competent. And weight discrimination starts young. Studies claim as young as age 3. And those dealing with it are going to feel the effects their whole life. So when you think about this, think last kid picked in gym class, right? Something relatable we all understand. And I thought I'd share a relatable story of my own just to show you how realistic this is. So my most relatable example is absolutely the experience of walking into a clothing store. My whole life, I felt like a ghost walking into clothing stores. In high school, I remember going shopping with my friends and I was pretty much ignored while they were doted over. And I always normalized it to make myself feel better. But I grew up, I lost 130 pounds, and I started to really see the complete world of difference I was experiencing. Suddenly, store clerks were friendly, they were helping me, bringing me items to the dressing room, and it was just a whole new world. And while this felt really good and I felt like I really accomplished something, after a while, it really made me mad. It made me mad for all of the times that I wasn't treated that way, and it made me mad knowing that people were still experiencing it. So why is there such a negative stereotype for people who are under or overweight? Well, in my research, I found some really interesting studies published online by online MSW Programs. And they note that unlike characteristics such as race and sexuality, weight is perceived as something that's someone is in control of. So it fuels that negative stereotype and bias. And of course, against people of different sizes. So people who are not considered an ideal weight are ostracized and discriminated against. This research cites a study where more than 20% of the respondents believe that obese people are more emotional, less tidy, less likely to succeed at work. So you can see how damaging this is. And people just don't understand that obesity is a disease with complex causes, and the negative treatment of people with weight issues can really fuel some of those causes. So where do people experience weight discrimination? I asked my Instagram followers if they could share their experiences with me, and I was so touched by all of the responses I got. So thank you so much if you shared your story with me. And if you haven't, but you would like to, please feel free to comment on my YouTube video and let us know your experiences, because while everyone speaks up, we can raise awareness together to really fight against, obviously, this terrible, terrible discrimination. So I asked for your input, and a lot of people responded with places we all go every day. I got responses from a few people saying they've experienced weight bias at the doctor's office. People said at school, online, at work. Someone also noted that they really feel like they see a lot of weight bias towards people in leadership positions or people in the media. And another person called out a very timely example of weight bias, which is with Khloe Kardashian, because recently some unedited photos of her leaked out, of course went viral, and we saw the extreme weight bias that was held against her in that situation. So these are some really real examples, and I did some research and I was amazed by how much research there is to back up how prevalent weight discrimination is in the doctor's office, at work, at school, all of these common places. So we're seeing it everywhere, but now we really want to talk about what is that impact of weight stigma. As reported by Psychology Today, weight discrimination has detrimental effects on health. The stigma associated with being overweight or obese leads to behaviors and psychological stress responses that contribute to more weight gain, including binge eating and lower levels of physical activity. The research by online MSW Programs also notes the extreme impact made on people by family members and medical providers. All right, so how can we make a difference? Obviously, this is a problem that's vast and wide, and it's going to take a complete overhaul from everyone from the media to us sitting here on our computers and our phones, just kind of starting to think about what this really means. So as individuals, I wanted to think about what are some actions we can take, and I found some really good research. I was reading an article by Rebecca Puhl, and the article is titled "Combating Weight Bias: Why We Need to Take Action," and this was on obesityaction.org. And some of the tips that she shares, first and foremost, are speaking up when witnessing weight-based jokes or fat jokes, because they're incredibly harmful. So tip number one, speaking up. Next up, we must use respectful language when talking about people affected by obesity. Be mindful and sensitive with the words you use when talking about weight. So our next tip is if you're targeted by weight bias, if you can and if you're comfortable, let someone know that their actions or their words are harmful. Another thing we can do is help educate others about weight-based discrimination, and even explain to people that obesity is a disease, and ridiculing people and making fun of them fuels that. And again, last but not least, if you have school-age children, take a look at your child's school's anti-bullying policies and see if this is covered in that area. Now, these are all individual actions we can take, and as people who, chose to sit here with me and learn a little bit more about this, it sounds like you're pretty intentional and respectful about the way you treat people. So hopefully these reminders are helpful, but it's no secret that there's a lot grander scale things that need to take place to really combat weight discrimination. Things like widespread education on the causes of obesity. There needs to be legislative action against this form of discrimination, and of course, anti-bullying laws and programs. And there also needs to just be an overhaul on how the media portrays people who are over and underweight. And it's also important for doctors to be better educated on how they treat those patients with weight problems, and for employers to ensure weight is not a factor when they're hiring or promoting any individual. So all forms of discrimination are hurtful and harmful, and together with some awareness and education, we can make life easier and healthier for everyone. All right, so this was a heavy episode. We kind of dug in deep to an uncomfortable conversation, but I think if you're here with me, you probably appreciate this, and hopefully we all learned something we can take with us. So I like to wrap up each episode of Humble and Hungry with the Humble and Hungry Happy Thought. And today, this is a poem that I found online that I think really speaks to anyone who's ever dealt with weight bias or weight discrimination. So I wanted to share this poem by author Scott Stabile. It goes like this: let them judge you, let them misunderstand you, let them gossip about you. Their opinions aren't your problem. You stay kind, committed to love, and free in your authenticity. No matter what they do or say, don't you dare doubt your worth or the beauty of your truth. Just keep shining like you do. I think we can all agree we need a lot more kindness and a lot less judgment. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Humble and Hungry, and I'm so excited because the next 2 weeks I have interviews lined up with two rock star ladies that I think we're going to learn a lot from. So we'll see you then.